Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to Fred VanVleet, Riker. He's been the main topic of discussion sort of over this basketball list period, as he's our big free agent coming up this summer, and he came out and talked about his contract and talked about the league in recent reports, and there's rumors going around about Fred, so lots to talk about in this podcast. But Fred, we'll first talk about the contract side of things, and there is some worry. He's been thinking about what the league is going to be like now that the revenue is cut down for NBA teams, and what the contract situation is going to look like, and his big payday will look like now this upcoming summer.
Ben, and break it down for us, because it looks slightly more optimistic. We had a lot of worry that I think some team like the Pistons or the Knicks, primarily, those were the two top contenders, would go in and try to incentivize them with something close to a max deal or in the high 20s, and we were unsure, given the free agents that we want to start to look at now moving forward, if Fred VanVleet would fit into that picture at such a high price.
Yep, for sure. And we'll break down his quote first. He said this free agent summer, he's acknowledged he's thought about it. He tries to keep it in perspective with everything that's going on, especially where he's having a career year. He says he thinks the league union will try and do a good job to make sure free agents this summer will get their fair shake in negotiations, as obviously the revenue's cut down right now, and that's not something that is hopefully a long-term issue, but we'll talk about that more so as the pod goes on. But he says he expects the league to take a hit at some point, and hopefully it's just minimized to this year. So he also talked about how people's health are most important, and they're all filthy rich, to quote him directly, in the first place, so no one's going to cry over losing a few million. So that's Fred's quotes directly on the contract side of things. Hoops Hype put out a rumor saying that he may consider a short-term contract, being that there's less money to go around right now. And you brought it up, there's a lot of teams we believe to that we're willing to give Fred VanVleet a payday, and we made a video on it a couple videos ago talking about the Knicks and the Pistons. But if the Raptors are willing to, there's less money going around, maybe and obviously he wants to stay with the Raptors, maybe this is a positive in terms of keeping Fred VanVleet. If he signs a short-term deal, we could give him a front-heavy 1-year contract and keep that summer of 2021 open, Riker?
Ben, I mean, obviously that makes a lot of sense. Let me first chime in on the point, though, on Fred VanVleet's point, sounding off to say that a few million won't hurt here or there. Let me just tell you, there's no sympathy from the regular folks, and also, I think it's pretty easy to say when you're a guy that's going into a free agency expecting a big payout, which undoubtedly he's going to get, but I don't know if it was Danny Green or JJ Redick, but one of the NBA players reported that the majority of guys in the league, right, the non-tenured guys, the non-starters, they're living paycheck to paycheck. That's a quote from an NBA player. They would know probably better than we do. And even though we see young guys coming in, like Jason Tatum has spoken about this, RJ Barrett, they say that they're really looking to live off of their endorsement deals and off of all that sort of marketing, and then they put into their investments into the bank their actual salaried paycheck. Most of the guys don't have the luxury to have all these endorsement deals and sponsorships, etc. So for Fred VanVleet to just go and say a few million is nothing, I would be hesitant to assume that that's true. But Ben, just in terms of us reeling this guy in, right, to get that, I mean, that's a dream scenario, and obviously an inopportune time, but with everything that's going on. But if we were able to, like you said, give him a big contract to show him that we want to keep him around, that we're willing to give him the money, but to be able to have a little more security going into the 2021 free agency, that's perfect.
Yeah, for sure, Riker. And the one thing I found really staggering when looking at this whole situation is we know the league is going to come back at some point, whether it be this season or next year. The league is going to return as soon as it possibly can, and it's going to come back with no fans. Until there's a vaccine, there's not going to be large crowds of people, and there will be no fans in the NBA arenas. And the thing, I've sort of associated the NBA with most of the revenue coming in to be online or TV ads, because that's what everyone talks about with the cap situation and merchandise with all the jerseys and all that they're selling. So I thought that ticketing and that sort of stuff would only be a minute part of the NBA's sort of income and the revenues that they're generating. But I looked a bit more into it, and In the season 2018-2019, the league had a revenue of $8 billion total. So that leaves, obviously it's not evenly distributed, but just for the sake of this estimation, we'll say it's evenly distributed. So about $266 million per team. And then to take the Raptors as a team, for example, the Scotiabank Arena holds about 20,000 seats. They charge on average $179 per ticket, and there's 41 home games, Riker. And if you calculate that total just in ticketing, not counting the concession stands, the stuff that's sold in arenas, that leads to around $150 million just from the regular season games that the NBA is losing. And obviously that's a massive number. It's sort of hard to quantify how much money that is. But when you compare that to the annual revenue a team is making, around $266 million, that's a huge chunk, and that's a lot of money going to be lost. And players' contracts, player salaries are a huge expense for these NBA teams. So going forward, if the league has to bounce back from this revenue hit, they might have a larger impact on contracts that really any average fans or the players are really expecting.
Well, then, of course, you know that all the reports that have been circulating saying the financial impact that not being able to resume the season will have on an already revenue depleted league, right? Given everything that's happened with the dynamics of the league shifting away from Golden State and maybe the interest internationally of the NBA for
China.
Various reasons that we don't need to get into necessarily. Yeah, so they're sort of on their hind legs already. And with this blow, there's no wonder that they're resorting to the likes of these horse competitions and all these different things because they just want to make content at the end of the day, right? This is a service that I think is necessary right now, especially given how cooped up people feel, how much cabin fever that people have right now, Ben. Yep. I think it's very timely for us to get sports back, but you're right, at the end of the day, it's a business decision and it's a safety decision, and they're making a big push for this because they're still needing to pay a lot of overhead costs, and if they're not getting any revenues in, even if ticketing represents whatever percentage of their overall revenue, just being back in the midst of things, having games, they're able to get at least some percentage from their sponsorships and their advertisements, etc. And I think that you'd even see a bigger percentage of people tune into these games because they're sitting at home doing nothing.
Yep, most definitely. So it's going to be just realizing how much of a chunk, even if the league comes back, that the league is going to take, how much revenue they're going to lose. That's going to directly play a role and might be a little bit more than a couple million here or there, as Fred is sort of quoted on saying. So, obviously these are rough estimates, and there hasn't been anything specific in terms. Obviously, it's been put out that 25% of player salaries have been taken back by owners and stuff, haven't been paid to players already this season. So, it's going to be interesting to see how all those contracts play out, and maybe the cap does go down a lot in coming years, and that's just going to totally change the dynamic of the free agencies coming up. Maybe teams like the Milwaukee Bucks might not be able to pay a Giannis Antetokounmpo a supermax contract that entices him to stay, and that was the big factor we've been talking about in him wanting to stay in Milwaukee, is the extra $70 million he'd get over 5 years, and maybe that money's not going to be there to the same extent. So that's going to play a factor in free agents we go after and free agents we retain, and Fred VanVleet. And you brought up the point of, will the league return? And I think we could shift this conversation sort of to that now. Fred, he also mentioned in these sort of quotes saying that he expects, because there's money, a lot of money to be made, as we just brought up, he expects the league will find a way, but he won't be surprised if it comes back. He won't be surprised if it doesn't. Riker, from everything you've heard, talked about over the past couple weeks, obviously we've been in exam season and stuff, so we haven't been making too many videos, but what are your thoughts now? Have they changed on the league potentially coming back? What are your just thoughts? Do you think the league will return this summer?
Ben, well, they're by no means an essential service, and
except in Florida. Florida names sports an essential service.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's no doubt. But if you are looking to the administrators or the people that are actually able to support this or to confirm, to legally regulate the return of the NBA, you're not going to get any hints or clues from those people. If you're following along with American politics, one day they're saying they're opening up the economy. The next day they're saying no. There's protests. There's anti-protests. Ben, it's going crazy down there. I think it varies. It varies so much from day to day. What I can tell you is that I think that there's a growing desire to get back that a month ago wasn't even a factor, right? I think health was the major concern a month ago, and I think it still is at the forefront. But I think now that people are really realizing there's not as much to do, there's salaries that's being left on the table because they're not playing, I think there is going to be a more concerted effort to get the league back. And from all the things that we're hearing, it seems like they're pushing in that direction.
Yeah, we brought up all the people that are going to be losing money, the stadiums, the owners, the players. They all have a vested interest in the league returning, even if they have to be quarantined to 1 or 2 hotels in Las Vegas or Florida or the Bahamas, and they all play in one specific area. So I believe I'm more optimistic than I was a few weeks ago about the league returning. There's developments every day in terms of the science and this stuff, so we won't even get into any of that whole can of worms on this podcast, but I think it's definitely possible. I'm definitely more optimistic. Riker, one pitch I wanted to throw out to you, though, because we obviously saw the games of horse. Do you think the league should sort of adjust to that style of filming the games with the camera phones and stuff, and the backyard style NBA games, having the finals filmed on an iPhone or something like that?
There's no way that those games or those matches were filmed on the iPhone, Ben. It looked like they brought out the old Nokias to film those, and I wouldn't be surprised with everything that's going on. We see the first game, it comes back at some sort of techplex, and we're watching 4 games happen at the same time. They only have one broadcast going, and it's on the same resolution that we watch those horse games. Would I still tune in? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I would. Would I enjoy it? Yeah, I also would.
Imagine they have because they can't film the games like that. They'll have to get professional cameras and stuff to at least better than what they had for those games of horse. But imagine if they did come back with the sort of FaceTime-esque camera, not even the good side of the iPhone camera, the one that faces you with the tiny lens. That would just be that would be the most ridiculous thing on the planet.
Well, maybe the next step up, Ben, is not opening up the league, but if all teams are quarantined in the same state, maybe they're going to start doing some, those intra-squad matches, and where one player is the recording person. They'll just break out the old iPad, and then we'll watch I'm sure every NBA player has a court in their backyard. We'll watch, the Lakers squad duel it out between yellow shirts and white shirts. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that, Ben.
LeBron's backyard court. It's gonna be a wild next at least month until the league comes back to see what the NBA does to make content. Obviously, the NBA, the Chicago Bulls documentary that's been out. Do you watch that after, Riker?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm waiting for more episodes to be released because once I watch a little bit, I'm just gonna be hooked. So.
Nah, that's fair.
Did you hear the reports? This most recent one is going to be about the Bulls' rivalry with the Bad Boy Pistons. So I'm really looking forward to that miniseries there.
Okay, yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes. They were good. I'm not the biggest MJ fan, but it's really interesting to see everything that went on during that season in his whole career. So yeah, there's going to be stuff coming out. We're going to be coming out with stuff, Riker. We got a lot of cool things planned, especially now that school's over for us. Whether it be, even though it's all online right now, it's still pretty hectic times, but it's going to be interesting. We have a lot of fun things to look at in terms of the NBA, Riker.
You're exactly right, Ben.
For sure. You guys are the best for making this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Have any last words?
That's it for me, Ben. Cheers.